There are many different types of social exclusion affecting people's daily lives, but imagine how it feels to find out you have cancer and then have to deal with the added pressures of social exclusion because of your illness. We went to the European lead cancer hospital, Christie's in Manchester, to find out how young people are taking action to deal with the exclusions they face. The Christie Crew are a group of former patients of the Young Oncology Unit at Christie's, but what is the Young Oncology Unit?
Basically, it's a specialist unit for teenagers and young adults with cancer, so everybody from 16 to 24 in the northwest region has access to here. It was basically developed in 1997, and we used to be a children's unit, and then we were refurbished and extended. And at that time, 10 years ago, all young people that came to the Christie were on the adult wards. So we started kind of trying to liaise with the other consultants, the other medical teams, and trying to get them to transfer the patients here. And slowly over the years, we now take 95–96% of all young people. So it's really a specialism that's built up over the last 10 years.
3 years ago, myself and Sam Smith, who is the lead nurse for teenagers and young adults, set about setting up a patient forum after the British government said that NHS trusts in the country should have a patient participation initiative, which basically means that patients should be involved in service provision and have their say about what's good about the service, what's bad about the service, and also to work on projects in the wider community to try and improve things specifically for this specialist area in oncology, i.e. 16 to 24-year-olds. So about 3 years ago, as I say, Sam and I set it up. Initially we had a core group of about 6 people, but at the moment we've got it's usually 12–13 people at each meeting. And they work on various projects, like I say, within the Christie NHS Trust, but also out in the wider community as well, which is where the ID card scheme comes into things, really.
So we went along to speak to the group to find out about a new ID card they have developed.
Well, a few years ago, one of our friends who's in the Christie Crew, she was having chemotherapy, and she was going out one night to a club with her friends, and she had a bandana on, and when the bouncers saw her, they wouldn't let her go into the club, and she had to come away. She felt really humiliated and obviously quite angry about it, and she brought this issue up at a Christie Crew meeting, and we decided we needed to do something about it because it wasn't an isolated incident.
The group launched the ID card scheme to stop incidents like this in the future.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we're concentrating on the fact that it's for young teenagers and young adults who have been diagnosed with cancer and going through treatment, and it's still in its early days yet. So we're hoping for that to go national in itself first, and then see where it leads to.
Really important. As good as friends and family can be, it's really great to have people who've been there and done that to speak to, because they actually know what you're going through. You can swap stories and experiences, and I don't know, it's just easier to hang about with people who know.
Gives you something to focus on as well, rather than dwell on your situation.
Yeah.
So you've got like targets, aims. Good to meet people as well. I think you find out that a lot of what you're feeling, although you've gone through maybe different treatment, but you feel you've got a lot in common by how you felt initially and things like this. You can say, oh yeah, I'm feeling like this today, and someone's like, oh yeah, I felt like that when I was at a similar stage. So you realise that you're not completely alone, and it's completely normal to feel how you feel.
It's almost like a tonic, because although you perhaps can't laugh at your own situation with your friends and your family, because it's quite obviously it's very serious, when you're in a group of other people who are experiencing the same things, you can laugh at your own situations and you make light of it, and that's a great tonic when you're in such a serious situation in your life.
Every year, 2,200 young people are diagnosed with cancer, but because of a shortage of specialist units, most patients end up on general wards.
It was at the start of my treatment when I was first diagnosed, and then several hospital visits as well. And it was only really coming towards the end of my treatment that I met these people, and they're my saviours. I really was going crazy because you just feel like nobody has anything in common with you. Nobody understands. I was next to a manic depressive once in hospital, and then on the head and neck injury ward at another, and it was people who had fallen badly and they'd just hurt the legs, or you know, they needed a spine operation or something, but it was nothing like what I was going through, so I literally had nobody to relate to.
It's such an isolating experience. You feel so lonely. I remember I was at another hospital near my university when I was first diagnosed, and I spent nearly 3 weeks on an open ward, obviously with other females, but the youngest was probably a good 25 years older than me, ranging up to, you know, 8 ladies in their 80s and 90s. My family were 2 hours drive away with restricted viewing. There was no television, no phones by my bed, so I was literally stuck on my bed. I wasn't able to get out of my bed because of problems I'd had from the operation.
After going through treatment in hospital, what other issues do you have to face?
I've gone into my local pub in my village, and the landlord said to me, "Do you mind removing your hat?" And I had to explain why I had the hat on, and he was really embarrassed by it and was like, "Oh, sorry," and let me keep my hat on, and bought me a drink. So in that way it wasn't that bad, but in the other way it made him quite uncomfortable, and I wasn't uncomfortable by it, but a few people sort of looked and were listening in, so it was a bit of an uncomfortable situation. Whereas if he'd asked me and I'd have just shown him a card, he'd have been able to be like, "Alright, that's fine, no questions asked," would have been over, people wouldn't have listened in. So yeah.
One in particular that springs to mind is one of my friends has mobility problems, and she has to wear trainers due to the treatment she received from having a tumour removed, and she can't wear high heels. So she often has to go out in trainers, and she's constantly turned away because of, you know, it's not policy to wear trainers in clubs and pubs. And obviously she'd love to wear high heels, I know she would. You know, it's sort of what you do to get ready as you're going out as a woman. So it's bad enough she has to wear trainers, but to get turned away by a male, you know, big burly bouncer at the door, she just hates it. It's so embarrassing for her.
I wasn't turned away, but I had struggled getting in because I showed them my ID, proof of age ID, and they wouldn't believe it was me. And they kept asking questions, and they're like, "Well, let me check your date of birth." And I thought, I'm going to have to explain it to him, but luckily I didn't have to, but I was quite embarrassed.
I was just horrified. It actually made me scared to go out because I'd only recently lost my hair. So the thought that people could be so ignorant was just really disturbing and upsetting, and it frightened me. So anything we can do to stop the ignorance and the discrimination, then that's great.
And that's just why the ID card was designed, to stop ignorance and discrimination. It's starting to catch on. Many local councillors and MPs in Manchester are backing the scheme. It's even been discussed in Parliament.
To be honest, I'm amazed that anyone would want to stop somebody from coming into a bar or a restaurant simply because they've lost their hair and they want to wear a headscarf or a hat to cover it up. And I would certainly urge them to reconsider, because frankly it's disgraceful that anybody should be stopped from going out and entering a bar just because they've got to cover their head. There's some potential, I think, for with new licences, effectively forcing licensees to accept people with these cards being able to enter their premises without hats, with hats. Sorry. You can understand why some places don't want people to go in with hoods and caps because they think they're going to be troublemakers. I'm sure it's very unfair on some people who just like to walk around in a hat or a headscarf. But what we shouldn't be doing is allowing some people to be discriminated against. So perhaps we can bring something into the licensing, into people's licenses, whereby they will have to accept people being able to wear a headscarf or a hat if they've got the identification to prove that it's for medical reasons.
It seems to be door security staff who can cause the most problems, turning people away because of what they're wearing.
Dress code policies, that would depend on the club I'm working at. Depends. So if it's a bar or a club, okay, for instance, a bar, they'll say dress casual, no hats, no trackies, no trainers. I mean, you can wear smart trainers, but not just any trainers. As far as you looking smart and everything, then you're allowed to go in. But if you're wearing hats, normally you're not like this type of hats, you can't go in because camera won't be able to see your face.
You've got to understand that 15% of the British population are disabled or have some kind of illness or disfigurement about them. And at the end of the day, everyone's individual. Everyone's still a human being. When they come in, we don't pick on them because of this. It just may be because they might be wearing something that might cause a problem later on in the venue for us. So they do need to take into consideration before they come in not to wear big designer logos, not to wear tracky bottoms. They've got to dress appropriately. That rule stands for everyone, no matter who they are, colour, creed, anything. They've got to abide by the rules of the
club
venue,
policy.
of the club policy. We're just doing our job.
Christie's first approached me that people were getting refused entry into the venues due to their wearing hats. That was the first time it had been highlighted to me as an individual, which was partly why we jumped on board with the campaign, because the ID cards made it so much easier. And I also know that Christie's came and presented it to the pub and club network to make people aware in Manchester. Because obviously with people and door crews changing on a consistent basis, you've obviously got to keep updating people so they're aware of its existence and what it's there for as a guide so that somebody's under treatment or they need to keep their hat on for their own self-esteem rather than a proof of age identification card.
Taking action over social exclusion works.
To the Christie's ID card, don't hide, wear with pride.
Help us be like other teenagers.
If you see someone wearing a scarf or hat on your night out, what would you now think?
I support the Christie Crew campaign.
Don't hide, wear with pride.
Please support our scheme.
The idea of this scheme is to stop ignorance and discrimination. So, anybody nice, please help us.
We are not victims. Please don't victimise us.